So tonight we're presenting the what, why, and how of ePortfolios. Hopefully to give you guys, for those that are not yet started, some information on maybe things that you should think about going towards that, and those that you are in the process of doing. So thank you for joining us tonight. I hope the information is helpful to you. At any time you have questions, or you can use the chat window, just go ahead and do that. Also, you should have my contact information when you registered. So if you would like any of the slides sent to you, feel free to send me an email and let me know. However, most of them are all available on the iSchool webpage. So we'll go ahead and get started. So what I try to do is just find there we go. Kind of general information of what you need to know, especially for those that haven't started yet, that I felt was helpful. I will be doing it in the fall, so I'll just kind of read through these. And again, if you have any questions, and Melissa, if you don't mind kind of maybe keeping an eye on the chat while I'm doing this too, to make sure people get their questions answered. I'm sure all of you know that it's Info 289, which you sign up for, and it's 3 units. And those do count towards your 43 units for graduation. You do receive a credit grade. In order to register, you must have a 3.0 GPA, and you also must have all your graduate candidacy forms filed before registering for 289. And many of you already might know that it's only offered during fall and spring semesters. You can take it with another class. Maybe our guests can, if they did that, they can share that experience with you of how that went. You will be assigned an advisor randomly, and you will not be able to change that advisor, so you will have to be able to work with them. And then once you are registered for the class, you will contact the student service team, and then they will provide you a permission number, and then they will assign you an advisor for this. So is there any questions so far? Is it pretty straightforward so far? Okay, I will move on to the next one. Oh, went too far, sorry. Okay, so if you go to the iSchool website, and then you go to the current student tab, and then course planning, you will see an ePortfolio link. When you go there, it will give you a lot of different information by topics, and these are the ones that I felt were pretty important. The first one is content. It basically explains what an ePortfolio is, which is basically comprises of all your work that you have completed through your school career that meets all of the different competencies that we are required to do. And also there's a link to examples of previous ePortfolios, which I find very helpful to kind of see how people presented their work, whether it was a web page through Weebly or you know, different things like that. Let's see. Yeah, it should have automatically started recording, I see on the chat. So the statement of competencies I found helpful, even just registering for classes now. It really goes kind of in depth of each competency, kind of a definition of what they are. So that also may be helpful when you're taking a class and it says it meets this competency, to kind of read through this, because it might give you a better idea of you know, what papers you should archive, you know, to include in your ePortfolio or any other kind of projects. The standards talks about the grading of the ePortfolio, but also it talks about the different parts of the ePortfolio, which I, again, I thought it was helpful that I was unaware of. So there's different parts. It includes an introduction. you have to write a professional philosophy statement, a statement of all the competencies. Then that's when you provide evidence that you've met all the different competencies, such as, you know, a group project, a database, anything that you've done to meet that, a conclusion, and an affirmation. Um, then the next link is example of items, and this just gives you a list of things that you might want to include in your ePortfolio from your different classes. Like I said, like I mentioned, a paper, a database, a website that you've created, any kind of items like that, you definitely want to archive. Um, and actually, I would recommend, just to be on the safe side, to either use Google Docs or like Dropbox, something like that that's not on your desktop. That way, you know it's going to be safe and it's saved, and you don't have to worry about, um, you know, losing it in the future. And that goes to saving your coursework. It kind of lists of the different things you should save, how you should save it, and it's a really good information site to look at as well. So any questions that I need to address, or are we still good? Okay. All right. So the next thing I wanted to share with you is their ePortfolio blog, which Linda Main, who oversees Info 289, um, she's in charge of, and it gives a lot of information that I thought people might be interested. It has the handbook link. Also, you can post questions to the blog page, and she will get back to you and answer those questions. So if you still are, you know, a couple semesters away and you have questions later on, this might be a good place to go to get your questions answered. And also next to the menu, you'll see there's also some links that I just went through that are listed there as well. And the next one is tutorials. Again, this would probably be very helpful if you want to go back and review, like using the ePortfolio dashboard. There's a tutorial, how to create a new ePortfolio. I know we kind of briefly went over that in the first class that we all were required to take our first semester, but for some of us that might be a while ago. So these are great resources to use, just to refresh your memory on that, um, and just different things that might be helpful to you. So those are the resources I was going to share with you guys. Again, if you would like copies of this, just let me know. We are recording it, so we can always just send you the recording. But also just go to the iSchool, go to current students, and then planning, and then the portfolio. All right, so we're excited tonight because we have two recent graduates, Stephanie Barnaby and Rachel Silverstein, who were both actually ALS student chapter officers. So we're excited that they are taking the time out to do this for us tonight. Stephanie is currently an evening library supervisor at the Feynman and Pappas Libraries in Boston, I believe. She also serves as the executive board and is chair of the Publications and Communications Committee of the Intellectual Freedom Roundtable of the ALA, and she'll be running for director at large for that. And Rachel is local to the San Jose State University. She's a librarian at the university and provides reference service, teaches information literacy sessions, performs collection management activities, and develops online resources. So now I'm going to turn it over to them, and Melissa and I will keep an eye on the chat. So if somebody asks a question in there, we'll try to have Stephanie and Rachel address that to them. So Stephanie and Rachel, if you guys are ready to go.
Thanks. Stephanie, would you like to go first, or should I?
Sure,
Oh,
you're probably better prepared than I am anyways. Can you hear me?
I barely hear you.
Okay, let me see if I can adjust. I commandeered our conference room, so is that better?
yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay. So my name is Stephanie Barnaby. You are right. The Bible and Pappas Law Libraries are in Boston, Massachusetts. I did the ePortfolio this past spring, from January to sorry, distracted. From January to like April. The deadline for completing the portfolio is not the end of this semester, which was something to remember. Okay, you can't hear me. Let me see. Maybe Rachel should go, and I will try and see if I can adjust my audio.
Okay, I can go, as long as everyone can hear me well. I'm just going to repeat what Stephanie just said. Make sure you understand when your due date is, because it's due a couple weeks before the end of the semester, which was a little bit surprising to me. So adjust your schedule to make sure that, yeah, here is the page to show when it is due. So it's best to create a schedule in the beginning of the semester that lays out all the competencies and how you want to get them done. I find that checklists help me a lot, just because it's very satisfying to be able to check things off. And actually, for each competency, I had a list of things to accomplish, and they were to research the competency, to collect my evidence, to write the essay explaining the competency, to write the arguments for the evidence, and editing. And I'll just copy and paste that into the chat. So those were my steps for each of the competencies. And as for researching the competencies, you are required to write your own explanation for each competency. So you have to be able to understand it and talk about it, and usually provide some sort of references for your work. It's not always required by your advisor, but some advisors want references. So I found that the book Information Services Today, an introduction, which most students get this book, I think, in Info 204, but it's a really great place to start. And I just would write in the table of contents which chapters I thought supported each competency, and then I would refer back to the book as a starting point for all of my essays. So I'll just write the name of the book. And so someone asked in the chat earlier if you could turn in your, yes, it's edited by Dr. Hirsch. If you can turn in your portfolio early, and you can turn it in early, but it's better to get one competency down all the way through, including the evidence, and turn that into your advisor to make sure that you're on the right track, so you don't do a ton of work and then realize you have to reform the way you're writing the essays, because each advisor wants something a little different. And so sometimes it's difficult to start on the portfolio before the semester begins, because you're not sure exactly what your advisor is looking for. They are all a little different between advisors. I'd say what you can do before the semester begins is to gather all your evidence from all of your courses and make sure that you have evidence for each competency. and advisors are generally looking for 2 or 3 pieces of evidence per competency, and they generally don't want you to use the same piece of evidence more than twice. And it's a good idea to start on the competencies you think will be easiest to answer, because it just helps you learn how to. Why do some examples give 1, 2, 3, or 4? Sorry, I'm trying to understand the question. Why do some examples of the competencies give 1, 2, 3, or 4 pieces of evidence? Do you mean I'm not sure exactly what you mean by the question, but generally 3 pieces of evidence is sufficient for each competency. So you want to start with the competency that you think will be easiest, because then you learn how to write out the different essays, and it just helps give you confidence for the project ahead. And my professor gave me the 3 competencies that most people find to be the easiest. So I'll just put that in the chat. Whoops. Sorry, that copy and pasted weird, but it's B, H, and M. And I find it varies based on which courses you've taken, and so those may not be the easiest for you, but that's what many people think are the easiest to start with. Again, it depends on your advisor. They have different rules. So some advisors will let you use it as evidence of more than 2 competencies, but my advisor wanted it as a maximum of 2. Let's see. I think those were my biggest pieces of advice. I would say that the student success planner was really helpful to me, because you can map out which of your classes fulfill each of the competencies. And that's something that I did early, where I would, like halfway through my program, I made sure that I was on track to have courses which supported all of the competencies. So I'll just put the link to that in the chat. So in case you don't have the student success planner. I have not heard of extensions being given to students. There's a, so what I would do is, when you write your schedule, definitely put in a buffer at the end of 1 to 2 weeks where you think you will have finished before then. But it doesn't always work out that way. So those 2 weeks at the end give you a buffer in case you are behind and need to finish up any of your competencies. Okay, well, I don't think I caught all the questions in the chat, but I'll let Stephanie go, and then I'm happy to answer any questions people have.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I use the phone. Yes, you can take other classes with your ePortfolio. I did. I took 1 class and the ePortfolio in the spring. I agree this planning is important. When I began my program, and up until probably for the first 2 years, I had planned on doing the thesis, so I was not organizing any of my materials, really for saving them in any way. So I do remember a piece of advice that someone had said at one point, which was save all of your assignments by competency rather than chronologically or by class. And I found that to be a smart thing. And so I attempted to do that over winter break before the spring. And you can have one class in the summer. I think it's a credit maximum after you complete the ePortfolio. So saving the materials was a bit of a trick. I, over the course of the program, saved them to flash drives, to my work computer, to my personal laptop, to a Chromebook, and gathering all the materials together and sorting out what kind of competency it seems to relate to was helpful. I will say that I did not take any classes that seemed to meet the instruction requirement for that competency. I think it was somewhere in the J through M range. I did just went to check, and the iSchool website is down for maintenance at the moment. Definitely have multiple backups. That's very important. I will say that the ePortfolio experience also varies considerably based on which advisor you have. I had Lorscher. Thank you. Competency K was a real struggle for me. I had Lorscher, and he wanted really simple paragraphs, 2 paragraphs for each competency. One was describing the competency itself and like how you had evidence that you understood it, and then one was the practical application of it, and you could submit a maximum of 2 pieces of evidence for each paragraph. There was also the wrinkle that all of the any visual aspect of it would need to be described so that it could work in his text-to-speech software, which was something that I was not really like I had no way of knowing. I hadn't thought about it, which was very advisor specific. So I ended up using things that I worked on for work, things that I worked on for ALA broadly and for ALA student chapter, as well as class information and assignments. So I use work from a bunch of different areas of my library life. I think the real value in the ePortfolio is taking a moment, a breath, to just sort of analyze what you have learned over the course of the last X amount of years, and you come out kind of done. I was also surprised to find that I didn't end up actually submitting a full, like, actual portfolio of work. It was submitted piecemeal, which I wasn't expecting, so I don't have like an actual finished portfolio, which was different. And I also used a checklist kind of system, but I used like giant lined Post-its on my wall in my bedroom to just try and keep straight which competencies I had finished so I could like physically ball up a piece of paper. I don't think it's ever too late to start organizing or too early. So does anyone have any questions? It did feel good, balling up the paper.
And feel free, anybody that just wants to ask a question over, using their microphone too. You don't have to necessarily use the chat, so just jump in.
So going in order in this chat box, I took a 2-credit class because I was also trying to finish up my last requirement for the advanced certificate in digital asset management. I felt like that was about as much as I could handle with working full-time and all of the commitments I've made to the Intellectual Freedom Roundtable. So, and I did do it and didn't die or anything. So I would be very hesitant to take more than one class. And I was thankful that it was a 2-credit class that I took instead of a 3-credit class.
I took, I didn't do it, well, I did an internship alongside my ePortfolio, so that's the only other thing I was doing at the time. It would be a luxury to only do the ePortfolio, but it's possible to do courses alongside it as well.
Lonnie thinks she missed the deadline for the graduation forms. I might have actually been a little bit late on those. That might have been a thing. I would definitely check with the student services and try and submit anything that you can as early as you can.
So your advisor is the person who has the final say on your portfolio. So they will tell you if it's been accepted. And I think it worked out to be that, let's see, how many pages was one competency submission?
Under a page for me.
Oh, really? Mine was definitely a couple pages each.
But he was using text-to-speech software, so all of the written component of my competencies was in like a comment and as like a submission. So it was pretty small font on the comments.
Stephanie, were you saying it was like 1 page double spaced? Or are you just saying like 1 page regular?
He did not, yeah, it was less than a page. It was 2 paragraphs.
Did you have the advisor who was blind?
I'm sorry?
You had the advisor who was blind?
Yes, he's legally blind and it was being read to him. So I can see why having shorter things was an advantage.
And Rachel, what did you say your amount was page-wise?
I think it was a lot longer.
Mine was 2, so that's why I was like 1 to 2 pages. Oh my gosh.
I think like 6 pages each.
Okay, yeah, that sounds more right.
So yeah, again, your advisor has a lot of control over what you turn in.
I took a bunch of the 246 classes. Writing, yeah, it might be a nice break to do something that's not writing and do coding instead. So right on, Liz. Internships are not mandatory for graduation. Rachel already got there. I'm really behind. There's so many notes.
Internships are helpful though. So I would consider one if you have the opportunity.
Yeah, the ePortfolio is a bit of an undertaking, but you will survive. I will say also Lorsher did this thing, and I think there are a couple of other advisors that end up doing sessions where they talk about specific competencies to cover for the portfolio. And essentially whatever your advisor tells you to do when it comes to the portfolio, you just follow those instructions, give them what they're asking for.
Right. And as Stephanie said, you want to make sure that you're saving all of your work, although we get a little email reminder about that every semester. It's just good practice to back it up and have it saved in several places. You don't know.
I didn't know until it showed up on Canvas.
Right. So pretty much right before the semester starts, you don't have too much advance warning.
And they really will not let you make any adjustments. In fact, I think if you end up signing up for the ePortfolio and then drop it because you don't get a form in or something, and then sign up again in a different semester, I think they still keep you with the same advisor. And I think only full-time iSchool professors are portfolio advisors. I don't think adjuncts or associates are advisors.
Right. And as Stephanie also said, you don't have to, or someone said, you don't have to take a course that explicitly says it works for a competency. You can be creative in how you find evidence for your competencies. For example, for Competency O, I wrote a article for the ALASC newsletter. So it can be, basically I made an assignment for myself. And Competency O, people generally have a tougher process with, but there's a whole page in the ePortfolio handbook dedicated to Competency O in case you need help understanding it.
In order to register for Info 289, you need to have a completed candidacy form on file. So yes, Gabriel. So I work at a law library, and in law libraries, legal loose leaf is a really common material, and it's the aspect of my job that I end up doing. So I train all of the our student employees, work study students mostly, to use how to file and manage their mistakes and any problems from the publishers. And it's pretty time consuming. We have about 300 different titles that are in loose leaf format. And So I have a lot of training materials that I use to demonstrate instruction, and it might be a bit of a stretch, but I got there, and he approved it. So I will also say that within Canvas in the student services, the iSchool advising and administration course that everyone gets assigned to, they have a lot of links that are very helpful for things like how and when to apply for graduation, and with contact information for the appropriate person at the iSchool if you have questions. For Competency A, which is about intellectual freedom, I worked on like a working group for like the revision of a library interpretation. So it's like the only real evidence that I had that I did it was like a meeting minutes that were posted online, and I used that for Competency A. So proof can also be quite broad. I included both Blackboard Collaborate and Zoom recording links.
Here's a good one. Rachel or Stephanie, did your advisors give you like writing outlines? I know mine did, but do you have, and that was super helpful for me to like try to figure out how I was going to structure each competency. And then once I figured it out, it's just the same one I use the whole time. So if you have any like examples you can give, that would probably be super helpful for everybody.
Well, my advisor did give me a guideline for how she wanted the competencies turned in, and it was basically a supplement to the Eportfolio handbook online. So that's what she based it on first, so it's always a good idea to go back and read that really closely.
We had some synchronous sessions at the beginning of the semester where we discussed what we were going to submit for specific competencies that he told us in advance, and then he like questioned us about him, and that's how he counted credit for those competencies, was discussing them like orally. It was a pretty different experience than I was expecting. The breakdown was 2 paragraphs. He didn't want like an introduction paragraph and then a paragraph. We just had the introduction and then the 13 competencies and then the conclusion. And we didn't really have a writing outline. The DAM certificate is digital asset management, and you do have to submit a form once you're, it's like a auditing form saying that you met the requirements, and one of the requirements is the ePortfolio passage. I ended up sending mine in after the grade had posted in this summer. I used a group paper. The group paper that I used was from Info 204 for organizational like analysis of a library, and I didn't have any meeting recordings, but I submitted the group paper.
Okay, it looks like we have about 15 more minutes, so if anybody has any further questions, or feel free to continue chatting.
For the DAM certificate, you have to do 9 credit hours in specific classes under one of the three headings, and pass the ePortfolio as if you are already an MLIS student or MARA. I did 10 credits because I took some of the 2 credit intensives to meet the requirement, and they can count doubly. So I'd highly recommend it. I think it's an important skill, especially if you already have 1 or 2 classes for it. I have heard colloquially that it has taken up to like a month for some advisors to get back to students, and that terrified me. I got a response usually within like 15 hours when I submitted one. So I think it varies a lot.
I just want to second and point out what Rachel Silverstein was saying about how, to the other Rachel, about how you can choose the evidence for each competency and write the competency in your own words. It's definitely, you definitely aren't, I mean, I haven't felt restricted in writing. It's kind of like I kind of create, the whole thing is like you're explaining what you think it means, like what it means to you and how you understand it, and pretty much that's all you're trying to say. It's like, I understand it, here's the proof. And it's very flexible in that way. I mean, the things that you don't really know, or the maybe specific things about the advisor that you're going to get and like deadlines and stuff like that, but at least the core of the work is going to be very customized to your experience. And that can be very helpful and empowering, as well as this being like your last experience in iSchool.
I do know some people that were assigned to an advisor that they had for a class. I think it also might be helpful for you before starting, just before, look at your calendar for the couple of months that are coming up, so that you know that, like, if you have a period of time where you're going to be out of town or it's going to be really busy, that you know if you have an assignment that's due that week, that you start earlier. I had a conference I was attending, and I was trying to get the competencies finished at the same time, and I wish I had better managed my schedule with the syllabus in advance. That would have been less stressful.
I think taking another 3-unit class on top of the ePortfolio is manageable. As long, I mean, it would be harder if you're working as well, but definitely I took a 3-unit internship, so it's definitely manageable.
I'm going to mention that if, because I'm taking a 3-unit course right now, also with the ePortfolio, and it is definitely, and working full time, and it is definitely a challenge, mostly because I really, really love this other class I'm taking. There's a lot of work in this other class. And that's the only problem, is if your other class has a lot of work and there's like discussion posts due every week and you have big projects and papers and stuff due, possibly if I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't take this second class just because I'm also working full time. But if I had more time during the day to devote to writing, then a second class is totally fine, as Rachel said. So it depends on your schedule, I guess, and what you feel is right for you, what you can manage in your off time.
I think there were 20 or so students in the class that I took in the ePortfolio. Like, my advisor had about 20 students. It's important to practice self-care.
Christine, possibly. It depends on what meetings that you might have missed before, because this one will definitely be posted on our student chapter website, which I'm going to link down in the chat. And because this is hosted by our ALA student chapter, but other stuff that you might have missed, they might put it on the blog. I mean, maybe some other people can say where they've seen some links, but since this is, it depends on who sponsored the event. It'll probably be linked on their website or on the iSchool website. I'm not sure about the Facebook group. Stephanie and Rachel, have you heard of it? I know that exists. I've heard of it.
It's a private event Facebook group, so we don't want that recorded.
Okay. Do we have a resource to where they could go learn about that? Or even if there's not like a link to it, but we can probably try to find out that information and email it.
I'm trying to find it, sorry.
It's okay.
This might, sorry, I am in the conference room and I don't have Facebook on the conference room computer. So
That's okay. We can probably figure it out, and then Beth can send it to everybody. Or
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote down the few names that were asking about it, so I can definitely send it out to them. All right, well, it seems like we have people leaving the chat, so if there's any final questions, or I would just like to thank Stephanie and Rachel and also Melissa for being our chair and also participating as a current ePortfolio student, for taking the time out and doing this, and I hope it was very helpful to everybody.
thank you.